In the rolling plains near Kazvi, a column of Soviet T-26 tanks advance at a brisk pace. As they crest a ridge, figures emerge on the horizon, infantrymen. But a tank commander soon points out these are not Iranian soldiers. After decades of rivalry in Central Asia, the forces of two great powers now converge, not as enemies, but as allies. As the two forces join, the men exchange nods and brief words, an unusual meeting between two armies who hadn't shared a battlefield since the Russian Civil War. The Second World War was the most destructive conflict in human history, displacing millions from their homes and separating families across Europe, Asia, and parts of Africa. If you've ever wondered how your family history might have been impacted by conflict or migration, check out the sponsor of today's video, MyHeritage, the #1 family history service for building your family tree, discovering your origins, and connecting with distant, unknown relatives. With more than 20 billion records at your fingertips, MyHeritage helps you find new family members and ancestor records with little effort. Our marketing director has been using MyHeritage for more than a year to assemble an extensive family tree of his children's ancestors, going back several generations to the Native Americans, 18th century England, early Dutch and colonial New York, 19th century Ireland, and pre-World War II Philippines. He even discovered an entirely unknown branch in Australia, descended from an ancestor of his wife who migrated from Ireland in the 19th century. Using tools like SmartMatch and Instant Discoveries, he's able to review actual census records, other useful documents, and whole branches to his tree with the click of a button. MyHeritage's visual tools also vibrantly enhance, colorize, and animate old photographs, bringing his family's history to life. If you've ever wondered about your family's past and want to support our channel, click the link in the description, sign up for a 14-day trial, and enjoy all of the amazing features MyHeritage has to offer. With a Soviet spearhead from the north and Allied advances in the south, the Iranian army proved under-equipped and underprepared to resist, despite recent modernization efforts. Reza Shah, Iran's ruler, refused to destroy any infrastructure and was unwilling to demolish what he painstakingly built up over the last decade. After days of fighting, he ordered his army to stop resisting. Although he had tried fiercely to keep his realm neutral, the Shah faced a deadly cocktail of circumstances and even led to his own abdication. Throughout the 19th century, Iran was stuck between a rock and a hard place. The British and Russian empires vied for influence over Asia, and Iran found itself caught in the middle. By the dawn of the First World War, the Shahdom had become a battleground for British and Russian diplomatic intrigue and financial competition, becoming little more than a partitioned puppet. The foreign dominance over Iran bred resentment among Iranian nationalists. One such nationalist was Reza Khan, who ousted the weak Qajar dynasty in 1925 and made himself the head of the new Pahlavi dynasty. He made an effort to create a centralized, modernized, and above all, sovereign Iran. He was determined to the point of obsession to rid Iran of foreign meddling. In these efforts, he found common ground with Germany, which shared the same rivals as Iran. Germany already had strong economic ties with Iran long before the Second World War. Between 1903 and 1912, Iran's trade volume with the German Empire grew exponentially. German firms invested heavily in the transportation, armament, and communication industries, and the two nations even signed a Most Favored Nation Treaty in 1929. Economic and geopolitical interests tied Iran and Germany closely together. When the Nazis rose to power, the relationship only deepened further. Adolf Hitler saw Iranians as Aryan as any full-blooded German, and the Nazis actively funded fascist Iranian magazines. High-ranking Nazi ministers visited the court of Reza Shah, while Iranian officials were cordially received by Hitler. However, Reza Shah's personal relationship with Hitler and the Nazis was complicated. Although he admired Hitler, he did limit Nazi influence in Iran. He refused to meet with Hitler personally and refused to authorize an Iranian fascist party. Nonetheless, to the Allies, Germany's influence over Iran was clearly becoming a problem. German technicians and officials were employed in key positions in Iranian industries and government agencies. They controlled important military arsenals in Iran and held a huge sway over the Iranian army. After the British invaded Iraq in May of 1941 to topple its pro-German government, protests erupted in Iran that the British deemed as pro-German. The extent of German influence over Iran deeply worried the Allies. British and Soviet planners worried that Germany's influence over the country would jeopardize their own interests in the nation, or might even enable a pro-Nazi coup to align Iran with the Axis. To preempt any unwanted developments, the British and Soviet governments sent multiple diplomatic notes to Tehran, demanding the expulsion of German nationals. As the Shah refused, the Allies inched ever closer to invasion. German influence in Iran was a crucial piece of the puzzle that led to the invasion, but it was far from the only one. The Shahdom served an important economic and geopolitical purpose for both British and Soviets. Any actions that ran counter to their interests quickly became a primary concern for both Allied nations. Iran played a vital role in the British war effort. Ever since 1914, the British relied on oil from the Persian Gulf to fuel its war economy. Iran controlled the single largest proven oil support accessible to the United Kingdom through the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company and its refinery in Abadan. Britain secured exclusive access to much of Iran's oil. Those rights, however, were under threat. Access to oil was a profound reason for Britain's mistrust of Reza Shah. The Shah had repeatedly tried to limit British access to oil and reneged on their earlier agreements. He demanded the complete cancellation of the oil privileges in 1932. Although a compromise was ultimately reached, it permanently damaged Anglo-Iranian relations. At the height of the World War, the Shah took advantage of a hard-pressed Britain to further demand an increase in oil royalties, infuriating the British government. Britain saw Reza Shah and the large German presence in Iran as a direct risk to its oil interests, cutting off a vital part of its war economy. The Soviets, too, had economic interests in Iran. Although its economic activity in the Shahdom was practically non-existent since 1935, the Soviets were still interested in keeping northern Iran on a tight leash, both as a buffer state and as a potential source of resources. An Axis-friendly Iran left the Caucasus oil fields, crucial for the Soviet economy, exposed. On the other hand, Iran's potential as a logistical route did not go unnoticed. The country could provide a safe, all-year accessible route for Lend-Lease supplies. Moscow initially tried to access the Iranian transport network diplomatically. The Shah refused, reasoning that such a request would compromise Iran's neutrality. Sensitive to the danger of an unattended Iran and recognizing its strategic importance, Moscow accepted a British offer to invade jointly in July 1941. Like the Soviets, Britain saw Iran as a geopolitical risk if left to its own devices. London was all too eager to invade and control the country. Britain's position in the Middle East was precarious, especially at the start of 1941. Germany's successes in Europe and North Africa led to countless people across the Middle East to believe in the Reich's ultimate victory and inspired widespread anti-colonial protests. In April, a pro-German government had taken over Iraq. Syria was loyal to the collaborationist Vichy regime, and German armies advanced steadily across Egypt. Britain realized the threat German influence in the Middle East posed, both to oil and to Britain's hold over its most important colonial domain, India. During the first half of 1941, the empire executed multiple plans to regain control of the Middle East. The one nation they could not strike was Iran, which acted as a focal point for German designs in the region. Not only could Germany strike at India from there, but the Shah also sheltered Axis sympathizers in the region, like the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. A British invasion of Iran could provoke Soviet retaliation. The country was under Soviet protection since a 1921 treaty. Nevertheless, as the Soviets came to their own conclusion that an invasion of Iran was strategically desirable, the interests of the two great powers aligned into a joint invasion and occupation. Ultimately, the Shah was too unreliable, the German influence too large, and Iran too strategic to be left alone. Starting in July 1941, the Allies would start applying more and more pressure on Reza Shah to fall in line with their desires. He made token overtures, but refused to give in to more substantial demands. His resolve to remain neutral was ultimately futile, and he abdicated less than a month after the invasion. Thanks again to MyHeritage for sponsoring this video. Click our link in the description to sign up for a 14-day free trial and enjoy all of the amazing features MyHeritage has to offer.